Under the sharp fluorescent light of Forrester creations, emotions rippled beneath the polished surfaces like hidden currents ready to explode. Taylor's day had been long enough, yet when Deacon appeared at her office door, uninvited but disarmingly calm, the air shifted. He brought with him a tension that was not just emotional but almost electric, as if his mere presence carried the static charge of unspoken memories. Taylor tried to build distance, insisting on professionalism, the structured control that kept her sane. But Deacon, with that quiet guilt of a man half-confessing, spoke of longing and restlessness. Though she fought to suppress the warmth that spread through her chest, his words unsettled her. He was supposed to be with Sheila, a woman of chaos, danger, and relentless need, but the way he spoke now made Taylor wonder if it was she, not Sheila, who had left the lasting scar on his mind. Her rational thoughts screamed for restraint, but something older, lonelier, within her trembled. The office seemed to close in around her as Deacon's confession hung in the air. Every sound was amplified: the ticking clock, the hum of the air vent, the muted city noise far below. Taylor's mind wandered to the nights she had stared at her reflection, convincing herself she was healed from old loves, old failures, the grief that had hollowed her out. Yet now Deacon's voice, broken but intimate, carved through that fragile peace. She knew his kind, men who carried guilt like perfume, who made redemption sound seductive. She told herself to think clinically, to remember boundaries. But the way his eyes searched hers told her that this wasn't about therapy. It was about two damaged souls orbiting the same flame, both knowing they could burn each other alive. At that same moment, miles away at Il Giardino, another storm gathered beneath a different kind of silence. Sheila was waiting for Steffy, her posture deceptively composed, her lips curling into the faintest imitation of kindness. The restaurant, usually alive with chatter, seemed suspended in air, waiting. When Steffy entered, the weight of history filled the space. Sheila greeted her as if they were distant relatives reuniting rather than enemies stitched together by blood and tragedy. She smiled too easily, her words soaked in honey but tasting of iron. She claimed she was done fighting, done destroying. She said she wanted peace. But peace from Sheila was never peace. It was a warning dressed as a gift. Her promise that Luna was locked away forever felt like a confession, like an omen she didn't even understand she was making. Steffy's mind didn't trust what her ears heard. She saw the flicker in Sheila's gaze, the hint of calculation beneath the mask. It was the same look Sheila had the day she swore she had changed, only to unleash chaos again. Deacon's name slipped into the conversation, and the mention alone made Steffy's pulse tighten. She knew Deacon's compassion was his greatest flaw. That man saw light in darkness, redemption in ruins, and Steffy feared he'd let Sheila's poison flow through his veins again. As Sheila spoke of love and forgiveness, Steffy's skin crawled with the feeling that a trap was being set in real time. It wasn't just the threat of Sheila escaping control. It was the thought that Sheila was already controlling the game, using Deacon as both shield and sword. Back at Forrester, Ridge and Brooke were locked in a quieter storm. Their conversation about Deacon's choice to forgive Sheila wasn't just moral, it was personal. Ridge couldn't stand the idea of anyone granting Sheila the illusion of redemption, not after the blood she had spilled, not after the terror she had inflicted. Brooke, though equally wary, saw the danger of hatred breeding blindness. They both thought they were protecting the family, but each word they exchanged became a mirror of their deeper fear, that even they could fall back into patterns of betrayal and mistrust. Ridge remembered too vividly how easily love could turn to manipulation, how forgiveness could become a weapon. Meanwhile, Taylor's struggle deepened. The image of Deacon lingered in her thoughts long after he left, every word he said replaying like a pulse beneath her ribs. She told herself she was analyzing it clinically the way a therapist might deconstruct a patient's defense mechanisms. But she wasn't detached. She was trembling. His confession had cracked something open in her. For years, she had defined herself by the roles others placed upon her: mother, healer, survivor. But with Deacon, She was forced to confront the woman who still wanted, still burned, still feared the loss of control. He was chaos wrapped in sincerity, and she was drawn to him not despite the danger, but because of it. Elsewhere, in the shadowed corners of the city, Sheila's promises were unraveling into echoes of something darker. Her words to Steffy about Luna being gone for good carried an unease she couldn't contain. Deep down, even Sheila sensed that her own lies had lives of their own, that every secret she buried grew claws in the dark. When she spoke of redemption, she meant control. When she spoke of love, she meant possession. Deacon had offered her something she had never known, trust, and it terrified her. Because if she failed again, if she lost this last chance at being human, the void waiting beneath her would devour her completely. As day turned to night, the threads of all their lives began to tighten. Deacon sat alone, the echo of Taylor's name whispering through his thoughts. He tried to focus on Sheila, on the fragile second chance he had built with her, but his heart was split between desire and guilt. He saw himself as a man standing on a bridge between two storms, knowing one of them would swallow him. Ridge, pacing his office, imagined the danger Sheila still posed, unaware that his daughter had already stood in front of that danger, smiling its false smile. Brooke stared out the window, her reflection fractured by the city lights, thinking of how every generation of Forrester had been haunted by love that came wrapped in deception. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Sheila, standing alone in Il Giardino after Steffy's departure, watched the last candle flicker. Her smile had vanished. Her reflection in the wine glass looked foreign, hollow. For a moment, the monster believed she had become human. But then her hand trembled. The thought of Luna's confinement twisted inside her like guilt she couldn't digest. Somewhere in that darkness, she sensed movement, the faintest ripple of fate turning. Luna wasn't finished. Somewhere, somehow, the past was clawing its way back toward her. Sheila's promise, meant to reassure, had become a prophecy of her own undoing. By morning, Taylor awoke from restless dreams drenched in confusion. Her professional detachment had been replaced by yearning. The boundaries she'd drawn between herself and Deacon felt paper-thin. She saw in him something she feared most in herself, the refusal to let go of the people who hurt her. In another part of town, Deacon's eyes flicked to his phone, where a message from Sheila blinked like a warning light. 2 women. 2 mirrors. 2 paths to redemption or destruction. At Forrester Creations, Brooke entered just as Ridge was ending a call. The silence between them spoke of too many shared mistakes. They tried to comfort themselves with logic, with the belief that good always prevails, but deep down both knew that the Forrester legacy had always been built on beautiful illusions hiding fatal cracks. Deacon's name hovered between them like a ghost. Brooke wondered if she had underestimated him, if Deacon's loyalty to Sheila could collapse under the weight of his old longing for Taylor. Ridge felt something colder, an instinct that the peace they were clinging to was about to fracture. As the day bled into evening, a storm began to roll over Los Angeles. In the distance, thunder murmured like a warning. Taylor, standing by her office window, watched the rain begin to fall, wondering if she had already crossed a line she could never retreat from. At Il Giardino, Sheila traced her fingers over the table where Steffy had sat, whispering to herself promises she didn't believe. And in a dim apartment, Deacon stared at a framed photo of them both, the faint reflection of Taylor's eyes haunting the glass. Everything was converging, the past, the forbidden, the inevitable. The city held its breath as old patterns reawakened in new disguises. Forgiveness had become a weapon. Redemption, a disguise for obsession. And somewhere deep within the night, as lightning split the sky, a single question remained. When love itself becomes a lie, who will be the first to recognize the monster behind the mirror? Under the dim white light of the November afternoon, the air in Los Angeles seemed thick with a strange mixture of love, guilt, and unspoken secrets. Deacon entered Taylor's office, breathing the air of a man who had tried to escape the past but had inadvertently taken it with him. Taylor's office, a place of reason and healing, suddenly felt cramped and suffocating. In the light reflected from the window, Deacon's face showed the conflict between the peace he was trying to find and the chaos Sheila had brought into his life. Taylor recognized it immediately, the look of someone who knew he was doing something wrong but couldn't stop. She felt herself being sucked into the vortex, as if past and present were merging, creating an energy that made her heart pound even though her mind tried to suppress it. Deacon talked about Sheila, about forgiveness, about reunion. But every word he spoke wasn't just about Sheila. It was a reminder of what they'd shared, of a moment when the lines between patient and doctor, between guilt and desire, had blurred. Taylor listened, trying to appear calm, but inside, she was a whirlwind. Meanwhile, on the top floor of Forrester Creations, Ridge and Brooke lived in a moment of seeming peace. The CEO's office door closed, shutting them out from the troubled world outside. Soft music played in the background like a trick of reality, and their eyes found each other among the unsigned files. Their love, after so much turmoil, was finally back, a fragile miracle they were both afraid to break. Brooke smiled, but it wasn't entirely peaceful. Somewhere in her mind, Deacon still loomed, the man who had confused her, who had frightened her with her own weakness. Ridge recognized that distant look, but said nothing. He knew Deacon was still the name they could never escape, a shadow that lurked even in their happiest moments. Ridge talked about love, about cherishing each other, and Brooke nodded, trying to convince herself that the past was asleep. But outside the door, the world spun. Secrets, threats, unfulfilled promises, all waiting to explode. Brooke tried to forget about Deacon and Sheila, but every time she thought about Deacon actually forgiving that woman, she felt a lingering fear spread through her heart. Not for herself, but for everyone she loved, because while Sheila Carter existed, peace was an illusion. At Il Giardino, Steffy entered with the wariness of a warrior returning to an old battlefield. She didn't expect to see Sheila, but deep down, she knew it was inevitable. And sure enough, Sheila was there, waiting with the smile that only those who had caused deep damage could wear, a calm smile that hid the storm beneath. Steffy looked at the woman before her, the one who had ruined so many lives, and all the dark memories came flooding back. Sheila spoke softly, trying to reassure, trying to prove that she had changed. But to Steffy, every word was like a knife to her heart, because she knew Sheila had never truly changed. Sheila mentioned Luna, the granddaughter who had brought everything down, and swore that Luna would be imprisoned forever, that the threat was over. But Steffy didn't believe it. She saw something cold and triumphant in Sheila's eyes. The more Sheila spoke of peace, the more Steffy felt uneasy, as if the very calm were a sign of a new storm brewing. Part of her wanted to scream, to expose all the lies, but the other part knew that silence was the only way to survive this game. Deacon, meanwhile, sat in Taylor's office. He confessed that even though he was back with Sheila, he couldn't erase Taylor from his mind. Memories of her kept coming back, haunting, vivid, as if he himself were being pulled between two worlds, one of sin, one of redemption. He said Sheila had changed, that he believed in second chances. But deep down, he knew that belief was just an excuse to hide something else, an emptiness that only Taylor could fill. Taylor heard those words and felt as if she were drifting in a dream, between the boundaries of temptation and morality. She knew she wasn't allowed to feel anything, but her heart betrayed her. Outside, dusk settled over the city like a thin veil. The last light of day slid through the glass, casting a faint golden glow on Deacon's face, the kind of light that only comes before total darkness engulfs. In that moment, Taylor realized that sometimes the people you try to save are the ones who drag you down the deepest. In Forrester, Ridge and Brooke were still in their own moment. Their kiss was a testament to what they'd been through, to love overcoming betrayal and hurt. But behind the office walls, the air was still heavy with news Brooke couldn't help but listen to, news about Deacon, about him opening his arms to Sheila again. Ridge held her, reassuring her that they were past the worst, but they both knew it was only temporary. At Il Giardino, Steffi left the table, leaving Sheila alone in the empty space. Sheila's smile faded, revealing a calculating look in her eyes. The promise of "it's over" rang in her head like a false mantra. She knew, in this world, nothing was ever truly over. Luna was still out there, waiting, and Sheila knew that every sin had a way of coming back. Deacon left Taylor's office with a heavy heart. He wondered if he had just made his biggest mistake. His feelings for Taylor were real, but his love for Sheila was also real in a twisted way, like a rope he couldn't untie. He thought of Sheila, of her pleading eyes and the promise of change, but he also thought of Taylor, who made him feel like he could be a better person. His struggle wasn't just emotional, it was a battle between the human and the dark side of his soul. When night fell, every character stood on the edge of truth and lies. Brooke looked out the window, her hands clenched as if she could hold onto happiness with her will. Ridge felt a vague fear, a premonition that Deacon would drag them back into chaos. Taylor sat alone in the dark, her eyes following where Deacon had gone, wondering if she had just opened a door she shouldn't have. And Sheila, in the darkness of Il Giardino, touched the ring on her finger, whispering a promise she couldn't quite believe. Somewhere, Luna opened her eyes in the darkness of her prison cell, a cold smile flickering across her face. She wasn't finished. And when a promise comes from someone like Sheila, it's not a commitment, it's a curse. Everything was quiet, waiting for the first explosion. When love, sin, and redemption collide, who will be the first to no longer recognize themselves in the mirror?
Oh.